Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name is Brady. I will be one of your hosts here tonight. Of course, I'm joined by my other co-host, Alyssa Hood, and we have a wonderful and fantastic guest here with us tonight. We have Sean Reynolds. I know you don't hear compliments too much from...
No, it's good. I like it. I can get used to
that. Sean was nice enough to grace us with his presence before, of course, doing the Kenny and Rennie show, which he does after every game. If you're watching this show, I'm sure you know about Kenny and Rennie. They do fantastic stuff over there. On a night where the Jets... They clinched playoffs. We're in, guys. Did we think we were gonna get here?
When? Like, are you asking 5 minutes ago, earlier today, 2 weeks ago? Because lots of answers.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a rocky road for the Jets. I know, Sean, you have touted for a while now that based on the math, the Jets were going to get in. At any point did you have any sort of pullback from the math and going, the math is saying this, but I'm watching this team and I'm not feeling so confident in the math. What did you think?
At one moment, and that one moment was the game that they lost 3-0 to the San Jose Sharks, and it was on the same night, I think. On that same night, the Calgary Flames, or earlier that day, or maybe the day before, the Calgary Flames had beat the LA Kings. I wasn't expecting that. I'd said time and again, and for the people who've heard it from me, like I've thought since January that the Jets were in, that it was near impossible for them to fall out of it. And that was predicated on, as bad as the Jets have been, you would have to be beyond bad to fall out of the playoff race, especially with the teams that were chasing them. Nashville, give them credit for everything that they did. They were a plucky bunch, but their schedule down the stretch of the season was a murderer's row. They outperformed what they should have been able to perform, but lost some key matchups down the end. And I mean, coming up against the Winnipeg Jets, they clearly could not match to the Winnipeg Jets game at that time, so they weren't getting there. And the Calgary Flames just kept on showing us who they were. I mean, every time you thought they would turn things around, I think they'd won 4 straight games at one point, and then they lost that stinker to the Chicago Blackhawks, beat the Jets, and then turned around and lost their next 2 games in overtime. So it was always predicated on the idea that you would have had to have the Jets so seriously underperform the expectations, and at the same time have the Calgary Flames or the Nashville Predators insanely overperform what they'd been doing to meet in the middle. Now, the Jets did their part. In the end, the other 2 teams didn't do their part. The Jets were going to get in a long time ago. I've thought it was funny going into this tonight because I would wager that by the time this is all said and done, the 4 points necessary that the Nashville Predators would have needed to pass the Jets anyways, even if the Jets would have lost here tonight and lost to the Colorado Avalanche. I'm guessing they don't get all 4 of those points anyways. The math tells us that they probably won't. So it's been interesting to see everybody kind of sweat over this over the last 24 to 48 hours, because I've just been sitting here. I've been planning to go to Vegas because that's what the math tells me, is that I'm going to Vegas sometime next week for the first round as the Jets open up as the 8th seed against the number 1 seed, which very much looks like it will be the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm already packing and have been packing because this looked like a foregone conclusion to me.
I'm very happy.
Say, Sean, is that what the math says, or is that what you want to happen? Vegas sounds like a pretty sweet option right now. I don't know, but I get guy was steady. His hand was like this when people asked him, "Are they just gonna make the playoffs?" Yep.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. Like, I'm a hockey nerd to the point that I just love like consuming and watching hockey. When I'm not watching the Jets, I'm watching, a Seattle Kraken, Carolina Hurricanes game or something like that. So, hey, if the Colorado Avalanche ended up in that first spot and the Jets were going to Colorado, I would absolutely love that. I called them to win the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the year. I still think it's going to happen. The Edmonton Oilers are playing better hockey hockey than anyone else in the NHL right now. And watching Connor McDavid, you better realize that you're watching something that is, a once in a generation kind of thing to happen. So I'd be happy with it to go anywhere. The math is what I'm leaning on in the expectation that I'm going to Vegas, because I do not gamble. So a city like Vegas is just another city to me that's got some pretty good food. I'll admit that, and a good hockey crowd. So I'll be interested in checking them out.
I am sorry to butt in here and say, but if Sean may not be a gambling man, but hey, if you are, get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Every hit,
Good
every
stuff.
shot, every goal from all your favorite teams and players. The Winnipeg Jets. If you were following Sean's plan, you could have put a bet on the Jets at some point when they were falling, and you would have known that it would have been money coming back to you. But with competitive odds, the best live in play, and more ways than ever to get into the game, like Minute Madness, our exclusive game with so many opportunities to win by the minute. Download the app in Ontario, use the QR code at the bottom of the screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. I had to find a way to try and just shove it.
Good.
Slick segue right there, Brady. I like it. Good work.
Hey,
it.
I would say it's a bit rookie of me, but hey, it was a low hanging fruit I had to take.
No, that was good. That's good stuff. That's by the book. Excellent work.
Perfect. And I think we do unfortunately have to talk about this game, and kind of I feel like we're probably gonna end up speaking mostly about the third period. Sean, I'd love to hear your take. Feel free to get in on the buffet here. How did you feel about the Jets game tonight? And then we'll dive into officiating and all the craziness that happened in the third period. But just generally, how do you think the Jets played tonight?
Well, I take a look at this game, and I think one of the things I want to give the Jets a ton of credit for is down the stretch here, the teams that they have played are teams that below them, that if the Jets set a certain caliber of game, I didn't think those teams could compete with them, right? Like the roster that the San Jose Sharks have, the roster that the Nashville Predators have, if the Jets raise their game to a certain level, they were going to win, period. Forget hot goaltenders, forget puck luck, forget all those things. The Jets were good enough to outperform all those things in games against those teams. And they went out and they did the things they needed to outperform all of those things. And that's why we find them where they are tonight. This is the first game we've seen in a long time where I take a look at it and I think the Jets won a game that they didn't deserve to win. This is a Connor Hellebuyck special. This is probably before your time, but this was playing a hockey game with a game genie on the old Nintendo system, the cheat system.
Yeah. I know the game genie.
There you go. This is God mode Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, if you take a look at the couple empty nets where they hit posts, and then Hellebuyck just absolutely, the good saves were amazing. The amazing saves were impossible on this night. Connor Hellebuyck absolutely stole this. I'm okay with that, because if you take a look at the last time these two teams played, the Winnipeg Jets were the better team, and Marc-Andre Fleury stole a game for the Minnesota Wild at that time. The one thing I think about with a game like this is it reminds me of earlier in the season when you were getting like kind of warning signs with the Winnipeg Jets, those games where they'd go out and they'd get outshot 15-3 in the first period, but they'd be up 2-0 going into the break. Those kind of games, we had a similar, and essentially it's those first two goals that are scored that dictate the rest of this game, because that was enough for Connor Hellebuyck on this night. The last goal, I think, is a little bit of a score effect, but I will say this: the goals that the Winnipeg Jets did generate, those first two goals, I love the goals that they generate, right? Like, it's getting to the net, it's creating confusion, it's sending waves of players at the net, it's getting the puck to the net when that confusion is happening. So the goals that they scored on this night, I think they earned. I don't think it's a puck luck thing. This is the kind of offense that if they bring that to the playoffs, they'll capitalize on that offense. I don't think they'll go very far playing the kind of defense that they did in the first period and the third period. You would most definitely be required to have Connor Hellebuyck in consistent God mode to survive a game like this tonight. But it's all about getting the 2 points. That said, we're close enough to the playoffs, and you're taking a look around the league. We talked a little bit about the Edmonton Oilers, I think, before the show started, and you take a look at a team like the Colorado Avalanche. They've rounded into their game. They've been dominating for a long time now. They're getting the muscle memory into their game to head into the playoffs at the top of their game. I would have rather seen a Winnipeg Jets where, the shots and scoring chances were reversed, and they continued the domination we saw that they had over lesser teams. They got one more crack to do it before they get into the playoffs, before it gets real, because the tricky part about it is, as good as the Jets have been down the stretch, catching teams on the back end of back-to-backs, dominating teams that aren't playoff teams. The thing that gets crazy about the playoffs is, especially when you're an 8th seed, every single game for the Winnipeg Jets going forward right now is going to be against a very good team that will know how to bring it, that will be extremely fast, that will interrupt the Jets' momentum, which they really, I think, really rely on. And we saw that in some of their past games down the stretch here. So the challenge is coming. It's going to be heavy. What they put on the ice tonight will not be good enough to meet that challenge. They got to raise their game above what we saw tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you touched on the goals that they scored, because I think that was one thing I remember wanting to highlight about last game. Oh my God, I'm losing my. Who did they play last game? I'm completely blank.
Sharks.
The Sharks,
yeah.
of course. Sorry, it just completely evaporated from my mind. All of the goals that they ended up scoring that last game were all goals that they went to the net and were driving hard, controlling the slot, creating chaos, and that's really what has been missing to kind of complete the Rick Bowness system.
Yes.
In my opinion, because I feel like when things were bad for the Jets, they kind of just let go of the difficult parts of the bonus system, which is following up on rebounds, going to the net, playing hard, and they kind of just left it to, getting the puck to the defenseman and just getting shots off. And again, I'm glad you touched on Connor Hellebuyck, because just an insane game from him. So many goals that should have gone in that he saved. I actually liked what Kevin Sawyer said about it seemed like they saran wrapped the net. Nothing was just getting by him for most of the game. Lyss, I am curious, how did you feel about the game here today? Anything else you wanted to touch on that maybe Sean might have missed, or just you wanted to bring up yourself?
Well, I mean, Raymond says, yeah, we just let anyone on the show. Sean missed tons. I got lots of insight to share that he did. No, just kidding. No, I think 100% right. Yeah, like you talk about the system and moving towards the net and actually capitalizing on those rebounds. I was talking to Brady a little bit before the game started about how, especially early on in this game, I found that it wasn't the most exciting game of all, and yet there were tons of crazy godlike saves from both goaltenders, and it was because we weren't getting a ton of rush chances or fun neutral zone like entries or anything like that. It was entirely shots to the net and then actually capitalizing on those rebounds to create some good chances and whatnot from both teams. So I like seeing that from the Jets. It's one thing that a lot of us have been griping with them over for quite some time, and it's nice to see. Noah in the chat says that he asks if we have the best third line in hockey, right? Like someone like Nino Niederreiter joining a line that collapses so hard, doesn't always play against the toughest competition depending on who's on line matching, right? Like there's a lot of good coming from these players doing the right thing in front of the net. And tonight that really was clear to me, and it transpired into at least 2 of their goals. I'm trying to remember, maybe all 3 of them. It was just good net front presence that really helped put them on the scoreboard and win the game ultimately when it mattered most.
Yeah, I also love the addition of Nino Niederreiter on that line. We kind of talked about it a bit last show. Sean, I am curious what your thoughts are just on that third line, because they've kind of taken up the ice time a little bit of the quote unquote second line. Have personally found that, with Nino Niederreiter on that line, I feel much more comfortable with them taking up much more time, taking up much more time that is available to the forwards, because that's a line that you can rely on both defensively and offensively. They've been putting a lot of goals into. Geez, I'm tripping over my words. A lot of goals in. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, mostly just on the addition of Nino Niederreiter onto that line, as well as what that provides Rick Bowness as far as options to put them out in certain situations of the game.
Well, I think in order for the Winnipeg Jets to get to the style of game that we are seeing them play down the stretch here, which is really predicated on hard work, getting up to speed, not giving up on any play, being really active with their sticks, contesting every single puck. You needed a culture carrier for that, and I think Adam Lowry has been doing that since. Hey, you were at one of our live shows, and in that game, I think that was the Nashville game in which they came back. Was it, or was that the Kings game
the
that
Kings
they?
No,
game.
it was the
It was the
It was the
Kings
Kings
game.
game.
Okay. Well, I thought since back then, Adam Lowry has been the guy who's been showing the Winnipeg Jets, see the front of the net. That's where we need to go. I'm going to go there, and you guys should follow me. Right. I think that he's really led the Jets for a long time in that regard. And you can see it's taken time to get everybody going there, but I think that's where we're heading now. Nino Niederreiter is a player that I think has just worked every single place that he's been put so far. But it's been interesting to watch the different kind of style of game that he's like. It's not an entirely different style, but it's been interesting to see the way that he plays off certain players. I really liked how he looked with Mark Scheifele, and more than that, I liked the way Mark Scheifele looked with him at the beginning. Towards the end, it started to get a little bit stale, no doubt. I know that the hope was always to get him to play with Pierre-Luc Dubois, but I'll say this: I don't think Nino Niederreiter is a player that anywhere he goes, no matter what team he's on, no matter what line he's playing on any given night, he's not the kind of guy that needs someone to get him going. Now, that said, I do think Lowry playing alongside him has elevated Nino Niederreiter's game beyond what we've seen him produce so far anywhere else with the Winnipeg Jets. And I think he's kind of like the perfect mix of grit and offense. Whereas Lowry is a guy over the years who's definitely has the grit. The offense can go to sleep at times. And I kind of think that these two players are playing off each other, because I think Adam Lowry is bringing out the very grittiest version of Nino Niederreiter. And I think Nino Niederreiter is bringing out the very most offensive version of Adam Lowry. And it's really become a match made in heaven. Whereas, Mason Appleton is just doing what Mason Appleton needs to do, is just use that speed, tear up and down the wing, contest pucks, just add that second element of, Nino Niederreiter cannot be stopped when he's playing like this, and nor can Adam Lowry. And when you do get away from those two guys, well, Mason Appleton just came speeding in behind you and took your lunch, right? So the way that line is going right now, I think they've been the culture carrier. I think they've been scoring the biggest goals for the Winnipeg Jets. You saw them on a night like tonight. I thought that they handled the extracurriculars that the Minnesota Wild wanted to bring into that game better than everybody else. Nino Niederreiter, I think, did a good job and kind of showed I think there was a moment in that game where the Jets were getting bullied a little bit. And I think it's a conversation we've had on our show. In the new NHL, they want the refs to control the play and kind of maybe start, in my mind, the league wouldn't agree with this, but I think this is where they're going, kind of taking it out of the hands of the players to police the game. And you just wait until the refs tell you it's a penalty, and then you react accordingly. And the problem in this game is the refs didn't do their job. They didn't point out the penalties. So the Jets stood back and watched all this stuff keep happening, and there was no response. I thought Nino Niederreiter's response was perfectly towing the line between, you're not going to push me around, I'm going to get in your face about this, but I'm not going to be an idiot and take a penalty in a 2-1 game and find ourselves in a situation where we're down and I'm the guy who ends up being in the box when they tie up this game. And then they score a late one, and then all of a sudden everyone's, biting their nails for the next couple of days until they go play. He rode that line perfectly. Adam Lowry stayed out of it until it was time to hop into it and took care of his business at the end of that. This line had a perfect night tonight. They were the Jets' best line. I think they've been the Jets' best line for quite some time. And boy, oh boy, what a tool they are for Rick Bowness to have going into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we look at when that line was united together, and it was at the same time as, of course, the Shifley Dubois Connor line that a couple of us had some question marks about was united. And, that line's been great for a lot of reasons. But like you said, it's been that third line that's been kind of the glue that's been really, really helpful to making sure that this team is competitive and playing their best level of hockey when they need it. But Sean, unfortunately, you opened the can of worms. So I think we're going to have to talk about it. You talked about the extracurriculars. I have lots more to say about the extracurricular. So before we even got on this, I took out a notepad, a physical Hilroy 200-page notepad to write down the chronological order, the sequence of all of those things that happened in the last half of that third period, because that was wacko. So I think we'll just kind of go through a couple of those things. I'll try not to miss any bases and make sure we got it all covered here. But can we start by talking about the first thing that kind of didn't initially have any impact? No one answered the bell immediately, like you were kind of talking about. But it kind of helped with the emotions that led to everything hitting the fan at the end. But the Ryan Reaves hit on Dylan DeBello. Brady, I'll maybe throw it to you first and give your initial thoughts. Then we'll give it to Sean to kind of wrap up our thoughts on that initial thing. I always say I'm not going to give a whole ton of comments on actual reffing calls and like the technicalities of hits because I don't trust my ability to do that. But looked like a board to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That one was right in the numbers, and I feel like the big issue isn't necessarily the fact that the Jets didn't get a power play out of it. It's more what it signals for the rest of the game, and looking at these two teams, obviously they're rivals, and there's if both of these teams get past their first round matchups, or I guess the Jets would be potentially on the Pacific side of things, but regardless, at some point these two teams could clash in the playoffs at some point. And so both teams are kind of incentivized to maybe, do a little bit extra, give a little bit of an extra bruise to your potential opponents. So for me, that hit right there, the fact that was not called, especially in a game where DeMello took a penalty earlier on in the game where he high sticked a guy, but he kind of just got his glove up high. If he called it a roughing, then I would be maybe not too upset. I guess he did get his hand up high and bunched him kind of. But right there is when everything kind of started going off the rails. And I'm sure you'll know as you have the list of everything listed down there. But as soon as that happens, Ryan Reaves has played in this league long enough. He knows that as soon as he gets away with one or two and the other team's upset about it, he knows that it's just his time to shine. And I thought that the officiating tonight on many of the different calls were very bad. The fact that Ehlers' hit wasn't a major considering he was injured on it. I guess we probably should talk about that at some point too. But and then moving on to Hartman and all that. I don't know. Sean, what did you think about the officiating? Were there any calls that specifically stood out to you as potential egregious non-calls, maybe bad penalties, this, that, the other thing? How did you feel about it tonight?
Well, I just want to say I think both of you absolutely nailed it. Like I think Lyss nailed it in that hit, that Reaves hit is what opens the door to everything happening. And I think you absolutely harpooned right to the heart of this with the comment about, because you can see it in Reaves' face. He throws that hit and there's like the kind of casual turnaround look at the ref to be like, okay, am I going to the box for this one? Because he should have, right? Like if we're talking about the hit that opened things up for in the Calgary Flames Winnipeg Jets game, that's not as egregious a hit. There's no consistency. Sorry, who is it? Rasmus Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who gets that hit? That is a less egregious hit than what we saw in this game here tonight. So if you're looking for consistency from game to game, I know they're different officials, but there's no consistency there. So yes, I think that's boarding. Yes, I think it's a missed call. But the fact that it goes uncalled, it's almost like you see Reaves turn around to be like, okay, am I going to the box for this? And once he sees he's not, he's like, oh yeah, okay, here we go. It's exactly like you said, it's my time to get going here. This is the standard they're going to set. Now Ryan Reaves gets to start running around and making things crazy. And I agree with your point as well, because I said this before, when Kirill Kaprizov goes down after Logan Stanley gets up on top of his back there. This hasn't been a popular opinion of mine. I think that Logan Stanley got on his back, and I think Logan Stanley, I've played against really big guys before. When big guys get their weight on you, they know what they're doing. I think he got his weight on him and felt he was in a weird spot. And I think he just like a hammer pounding a nail into the ground, pushed him into the ground. And I, at that time, I said, I'm okay with that. I like that play. I think he was trying to put him in a bad spot, and in the end he did, and I'm okay with that. There was nothing illegal about it. You're taking a pound of flesh out of an opponent that you may see down the stretch. I like that kind of hockey, right? So when I take a look at what happened here tonight, I hate to say it, I like what I saw, kind of the response from both teams, because if the refs aren't going to take care of business, and again, we go back to the league, which I disagree, is saying, let the refs take care of it. Well, when they don't, what do you do? Well, tonight is what we saw. We saw the Jets kind of take a little bit of time to wake up to it, and the Minnesota Wild take liberties with the Jets until that happened. But that to me was definitely the moment all that opened up. The Ehlers hit is one I think is really interesting, because Hartman, no doubt, in another league, like 10 years ago, Nick Ehlers would have been coming to hit Ryan Hartman. And so I'm wondering if there's a little bit in his head of the old school mentality that he thought a guy was coming to hit him and thought, I'm going to give it back to that guy. Right. But instead he's, throwing a pick, and it's like a basketball pick that is just way, way, way too aggressive. That's what that one turned into for me. But no doubt that's got to, I think that there needs to be a response when that happens at that point in the game for the Winnipeg Jets. But everything that follows it just goes out of control. A lot of people are losing their minds and saying Dean Evison should be suspended after this because he threw Ryan Reeves out there. Well, if you take a look at the way this situation is, a much bigger Brendan Dillon gave a whooping to Ryan Hartman to get back at him, right? So the Jets sent out their big boy to take on a guy. Ryan Hartman can handle himself, but the Jets definitely got another weight class out there, took advantage of that situation. No one out there should be at all confused with the idea that Neil Pionk was trying to snap off the bottom half of the floating ribs of Johansson. Is it not? Like, this is not, as mad as you are, this is maybe the most egregious thing that was done in the game tonight. And so the response that you're seeing from the Wild, I get it. Fans take a look. They hate it when their players get beat on, and they love it when their players beat on another team. This just built and built. It was two teams challenging, gearing up for the playoffs. I don't have a problem with the way that the game unfolded and the response by the players. I've got a problem with a league that says, don't worry, we're taking care of all this stuff, and then gets surprised that when they don't take care of it, you get a response like this. To me, the players were called upon by the situation in the game and by defending each other to have to respond the way they did in the lack of the calls that we would have expected to happen in that game.
For sure. I also, the one other call that I wanted to at least highlight that I don't have anywhere to go after this, but I just want to mention it. I have no idea how when Nino and Reeves got tied up there, when off the draw, Ryan Reeves is like, sticking at Nino Niederreiter, and then, Nino obviously knows the hit's coming. He doesn't really reverse hit him, but he definitely, braces for it. And then Ryan Reeves gets on top of him, like places a knee on him basically. And then ref comes and says, oh, you guys are both going. It's like, that is like just so frustrating to be like, okay, finally you have a second chance to put this guy in the box. And yet you don't really take that up, or you do take that opportunity, but it doesn't give any sort of advantageous to the Jets. I mean, not that it would have really mattered. But also in regards to the Hartman one, like, I don't know. I think that Hartman kind of brought that upon himself. Like, they were just kind of
for sure
poking at each other in front of the net. Like, I don't think that was an Ehlers relating. Well, I mean, it might. Oh,
you don't think so?
I'm sure it has to do with it.
Yeah.
But
they were all mad.
But he also slashed Dylan in the face, kind of like. So I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, he totally did.
Yeah.
And then he turtles and.
Yeah. There was an interesting. I just want to go back to you were pointing out that play where those two players got tangled up. You could see, and this is going back to what I'm talking about. The Winnipeg Jets have done a really good job over this time as the officials have been like, we'll take care of the game. We'll just let, if you remember that Dylan DeMello goal, who did he score it against? Where they was it?
There are only 6 of them, but they're all the best. So.
Yeah. Oh, it was down on that Florida trip. I think it was against the Hurricanes, the one where basically everyone stopped playing because they thought penalties were called and the refs wouldn't. Like, so you could see that same thing happen when the Niederreiter Reeves thing was happening, because Blake Wheeler had the puck and he was entering the zone and he kind of went to stop and then kind of kept playing. But at the same time, you knew something was going on behind the scenes. I knew at that point in the game, the Wild had taken way too many liberties. So if I was the Jets, I would be like, forget this, keep playing BS. We need to go start standing up for ourselves. But you could see in that moment, just the way that Blake Wheeler reacted, that was a reaction by players that did not know what direction to take this. And should we be following the refs' cues? Do we need to start taking care of this on our own? I thought that was one of those moments, and it reminded me of the time where DeMello just looked around and said, oh, they're not going to call this. Okay, I'm going to go down and score. It was a similar situation to that. But I almost think that in their heads, the Jets thought, okay, well, we could do that, or maybe we should just go defend ourselves at this stage of the game. Enough's enough. And that's the weird position that the players were put in this game, whether or not they had to say, okay, it's time to take our faith in the refs and throw it to the side and police this thing ourselves, or do we keep trying to make this go the way the league wants this to go? I thought it was an interesting point.
100%. And that Dylan DeMello goal is probably the entire highlight of my life. Like, that was like the greatest day ever. I was jumping up and screaming. That was so funny. And I fully agree. It was a very similar situation to that. I think we can probably move on from the reffing a little bit, but I just want to get my bit in here. The one that I'm most confused about, when did Marcus Foligno get a 10-minute misconduct at the end of the game? I was looking at the score, the list of the things, and I was making jokes before the game because Marcus Foligno always gets at least a 5-minute penalty for something when we play the Jets, like just always. What happened? Was he even on the ice? It was in the same whistle that Adam Lowry fought Ryan Reeves in. It was. Do you guys know? Maybe if you guys are in the chat. Speaking of, if you're in the chat, thank you so much for being here. Like the stream, subscribe, we love you. Do you guys know what happened there? Is that a real thing, or was that a mess up on the score?
I personally have no idea. I didn't see it. Maybe just like
probably stuck someone from behind while they were watching the festivities. That's the kind of play that usually happens in a situation like that. Yeah,
true. Before we move on, a couple people have some questions in the chat about some playoff stuff, so you can probably wrap up, because obviously Ken. Oh my gosh, I just called you by the wrong name. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No,
Reddy's got to go to his other show.
We made it rhyme, so that always gets tricky. Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about some futures and whatnot, but just super quick poll between the two of you. Sean, I'll throw it to you first. I put this as a Twitter poll, but I'm curious. Now there's a third option: Pionk cross-check, Hartman hit mid ice on Ehlers, and the Ryan Reeves board. How many of those go to Department of Player Safety and get reviewed / get a suspension or fine?
One. I think the Pionk cross check.
Yeah, I think I agree. That one at least was the first, like, you can easily say was the most malicious, and like you could pin on him being like, or you can say that one definitely had the most intent to it. I would say
there was nothing about that was a hockey play. That was just a straight up punishment, trying to mete out punishment. I think that even though I don't think it was, I think the Hartman thing, you could almost kind of argue that he was like trying to do a hockey play. He saw a guy coming fast, was trying to defend himself. Like, there's enough, or even though I don't think that that's the case, I think there's enough going on in that you could get an out of it. There's no, you see that Pionk cross check in slow motion. He is trying to go underneath that arm and then up into those ribs. Like, it is a very deliberate, very successful attempt to inflict a lot of punishment. And he pulled it off.
And the Hartman one is like, that one is just a penalty, like, and should have been a 5 in my opinion, just because Ehlers was hurt, but nothing more than that. I don't think that it was like necessarily malicious. It was just like hey, this is an intense game, and I'm gonna throw a backwards hit, which is allowed most of the time in the league, or at least just punishable by an interference call. But yeah, I would not be surprised if Pionk gets a game, and maybe that might not be the worst thing. Just
Yeah,
get
maybe
him
he
to
was
sit.
taking that game anyway.
Yeah.
Lyss, I thought
True.
you were going to say that your poll was who do you want the Jets to match up, or who do you think the Jets match up best with as far as potential first seeds? That's
Well,
where
that's
I
where I
thought you
was
were going with
going.
that.
That is where I'm going next, actually, because
Okay,
we have a couple
good.
people in the chat. Nick from Top Line Media is in the chat. Adam, my cousin from Edmonton's in the chat. I guess my mom
Boom.
sent the link out to the family group chat. So we got a Brady bunch going on out here, but no pun intended. But so obviously we have one game left to determine some things for the Jets. Like, we're obviously wild card 2 over here, but there's some interesting stuff going on, mostly in the Pacific. I don't think Colorado is much of a worry at this point. I'm not 100% familiar with the exact technicalities there, but let's look a little bit at some of the matchups that the Jets are inevitably going to be playing a week from now. Most likely scenario is Vegas, followed by some potential for some Edmonton, for some Colorado. Sean, what do you think is the best matchup for the Jets? A couple people in the chat have been sharing their opinions. A couple people have said, just some more off the ice stuff, like of how these teams dislike or like each other, and maybe some history with Vegas in the playoffs, some history with Edmonton in that sweep. There's a lot of noise surrounding a couple of these potential matchups. If you're looking at the Winnipeg Jets making it out of the first round, what do you think is the best matchup that they should be hoping for?
So this entire year with Colorado and the injuries that they've had, and this notion that everyone kept talking about the trade deadline, that the West was wide open, I thought that was a really insulting suggestion for a number of teams. I hated that argument. Let's go out here because no one in the West is at all capable, and like everybody said it, like from the top guys on a lot of the different stations here in Canada, down in the States, everyone kept saying it. The Colorado Avalanche, when they've been healthy, have been everything that they were last season. And they don't even have Gabriel Landeskog back yet. This team, when they've been put together, have been dangerous. We've taken a look at them down the stretch. They've turned their game on right at the exact time. This is a team last year that I thought played the most dominant hockey game I have ever seen before. Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals against an extremely capable Tampa Bay team was just absolutely the most dominant performance I've ever seen in a hockey game before in my life. This team is capable of that. Nathan McKinnon right now is kicking ass and taking names. He's coming in, and then you've got Cale Makar, and you've got everything that we've got. Their defense, when healthy, are extremely dangerous. I like that Georgiev pickup by them. I don't think people have been talking about them as much. Last year, this was a team that won the Stanley Cup final in spite of their goaltending, and everything that I've heard from them last season so far this season, is that goaltending is not their problem. So that is going to have the potential to erase some of the things that are missing from last season. They're a dangerous team. I wouldn't want anything to do with that team. The Edmonton Oilers right now, we were talking before the show started out here, all the stuff everyone says, well, they've got the very obvious problems in goaltending and on defense and all that kind of stuff. But the addition of Mattias Ekholm, I've talked to a lot of scouts and a lot of hockey people behind the scenes. Mattias Ekholm is one of those moves that you plug him in, suddenly he's on one side, he takes up 25 minutes a night. This is what I always used to say about the Chicago Blackhawks. They were so dangerous because Keith would basically take up 30 minutes. Seabrook would take up 30 minutes. Jarmelson would take up 30 minutes. Well, you only have to find 30 minutes now for the rest of your defensemen out there. When you get a guy like Ekholm, who's a workhorse and can play defensively, one, he slots in right at the top, and then a guy like Nurse has to play different kind of minutes that he's more successful at, but he just takes so much of a piece that makes them a better defensive team. And we've seen it. Them as a better defensive team has made their goalies better. They are deep from line 1 all the way down to line 4. Do they have the best defense in the NHL playoffs? Absolutely not. Do they have the best goaltending? Absolutely not. But it's not the problem that people are making it out to be. They are extremely dangerous, and their record lately shows. The Vegas Golden Knights are probably the easiest answer to say that, because there's a question mark in goaltending, and a player like, some of their players seem a little bit untested when it comes to the playoffs. We don't know what Mark Stone's situation is going to be. But I will say this, the Jets in the past, in 2018, ever since, don't match up well against Vegas, because the Winnipeg Jets, what you saw from them over the last number of games, they work best when they've got that momentum, right? Where they just roll and roll and roll and roll. And fans know exactly what I'm talking about, because when you're in the building and it's happening, you get louder and louder and louder. And then they get those kind of shifts where they're in their own zone. They've got the opposition penned up in their zone, and they change, and then they change again, and they bring in lines, and they just roll. The Winnipeg Jets operate best when they're playing like that. It is very hard to do that against the Vegas Golden Knights, because they are so fast and their sticks are so good. They're so good at interrupting passing lanes. They're so good at breaking that kind of stuff up. And I've found the Jets have always really struggled when it came to the way that the Vegas Golden Knights interrupt their flow. It's going to take a special performance, I think, by Connor Hellebuyck in order for the Jets to get past the Vegas Golden Knights if they end up playing them in the first round. Good thing he's showing that he's capable of doing that the way he's played lately.
Absolutely. And I think Sean's got some obligations. I got a timer I'm looking at here, because Sean's obviously got to get to Kenny and Rennie. So we're going to make sure we get things wrapped up here. I just got to say, though, Sean, I feel so vindicated right now, because Brady has given me a hard time for so long, because I was so mean to Darcy Kemper for like a year. And I was like, Colorado won the Stanley Cup in spite of their goaltending. And he's like, he's not that bad. And I know he's not that bad, but that was a really special moment for me personally. Brady, I win, you lose, suck it.
I mean, the cap stinks. So, I mean, maybe that also,
there we go.
That's another reason.
And as of tonight, I sat my brother and sister down, and I was like, you guys need to understand the best hockey that we will ever watch in our lives. That chapter is over. No Pens, no Caps in the playoffs this year. No Sydney, no Ovi. My heart is broken. Paul Maurice has clinched the playoffs too, so congrats to that guy. But I think that about wraps up the general gist of what we wanted to talk about tonight. Brady and I are obviously both super huge Sean fans. We love Sean's work on Sportsnet and everything he does to cover the Jets. Just an absolute stellar professional and great guy. So we are so happy that we were able to get you on before the regular season ended. And we'll probably be heckling you in the chat and Kenny and Rennie after this. But Brady, any last words before we let Sean sign off and let him go?
Nope. Thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it.
Brady's mad I vindicated you. I can tell right now. He's mad about that. Hey, I just wanted to say I reciprocate. As you both know, I've been huge fans of both of yours for a long time. I think you're great pros. I remember the first time I talked with both of you, interviewed with both of you. I was highly impressed, really enjoyed myself, just like I did here tonight. I had a ton of fun, and I want to thank you two for having me on. It means a lot.
We really
can't wait to see you at the last Kenny and Rennie live show of the year, whenever that happens. Hopefully in June, when, like Lucas said, we see the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup final. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. Make sure you like the stream on the way out, and head over to Kenny and Rennie to catch some more content on the Jets and some more coverage on what an exciting game that was. And we'll be back. Brady and I will be together for the last game of the season against Colorado on Thursday. That's a little bit of a later one. But yeah, we will see you.
Thank you so much.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction.